Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Master of Desire by Kinley Macgregor, narrated by Antony Ferguson. Prologue. He is the devil! Draven de Montague, the fourth Earl of Ravenswood, snorted aloud at the conviction in Hugh's voice as they stood before the throne of King Henry II, while Draven's brother and one of Hugh's men stood a few feet behind them. 'Twas an epitaph he'd heard more times than he could count. His lips curling in wry amusement, Draven quickly agreed. "Spawned of hell and suckled on the teat of a demon. I make no claims to anything else." It was, after all, his reputation they spoke of. And in this land of chaos, Draven was the undisputed champion. Two guards, who stood as still as statues, flanked the throne where the king sat. Dressed in a dark mulberry, with his gold crown shining in the torchlight, Henry looked less than pleased as he darted his gaze between his two noblemen. Even though Draven had shed his own blood, and spilled even more to secure Henry's crown, he knew the limits of his monarch's tolerance, and at this point the king had been pushed too far. Hugh took a careless step toward Henry's throne. "I want him to leave my lands alone, Majesty. Surely he has enough land to pacify himself with, that he can leave off Warwick." Henry Plantagenet was not a man one approached recklessly. He was a man made by his own determination and raw courage, a man who had much in common with Draven, and, better still, he was a man indebted to Draven. The look on Henry's face was one of hell-wrath and brimstone. Finding a moment of sanity, Hugh stepped back and cast his gaze to the cobbled floor. Henry looked to Draven and sighed. "We do not understand how this conflict started, Draven. You say he attacked you, and Hugh, you say he attacked you, and neither of you claims to have instigated the matter. This reminds us of two ill-bred children fighting over a toy, while they both scream injustice. We particularly expect better from you, Draven." Draven did his best not to show the anger coiling through him. He had served Henry faithfully for more than half his life. Even so, he was no man's fool or pawn, and he answered to no one save himself. Henry had long ago learned that fact, and it was what made Draven such a valuable ally to him. Their alliance had been forged in battle and in blood. His rage simmering, Draven dared to meet the king's gaze as an equal. "As you well know, my liege, I do not cower, nor will I bow down before this man as he attacks my peasants and raids my fields. If Hugh wants a war, then, by God, I am definitely the one to deliver it to him." Henry looked upward as if seeking the holy saints to aid him. "We grow weary of our lords battling amongst themselves. We realize the years under Stephen were lax, but those days are gone. 'Tis I, Henry, who rules this land, and we shall have peace in it." He looked straight at Draven. "Do you understand?" "Aye, my liege." Henry's look then turned to Hugh, whose gaze still examined the floor at his feet. "And you?" "Aye, sire." Henry's stern features relaxed a degree. "'Tis good, then. But since we know better than to trust two mice left afield while the cat is occupied elsewhere, we must set this deal in a more permanent fashion." A sick feeling of dread settled in Draven's gullet. He knew Henry well enough to realize this would not be to his liking. Henry continued, "Since neither of you seems wont to admit who attacked first, we shall implore the wisdom of Solomon. If you both have possession of something the other cherishes, then mayhap you'll think twice before committing any further hostilities." "Majesty?" Hugh asked, his voice carrying the weight of his own trepidation. Henry stroked his auburn beard. "You have a daughter, do you not, Hugh?" "Aye, sire. I have 3 still living." Henry nodded, then looked to Draven, who met his gaze with impertinent directness. "And what of you, Draven?" I have a wastrel brother I have longed to be rid of for years." Said brother sputtered in indignation from 10 paces behind him, but wisely kept his silence before his king. His face perplexed, Henry thought the matter over. "Tell us, Simon," he directed to Draven's younger brother, "what does your brother hold dearest on this earth?" Draven turned slightly to see Simon squirming beneath the attention of his king. With his head sedately bowed, Simon spoke. "In truth, your majesty, 'tis his honour only that he treasures. He would die to protect it." "Aye," Henry said thoughtfully. "We have seen the limits to which he would go to see his honour held. Very well. We demand Draven swear on his honour that he will not raid or harass Hugh, and Hugh is to hand one of his daughters over as pledge for his good conduct." "What?" Hugh bellowed so loudly that Draven half expected the rafters to fall down around them. "You cannot be serious!" Henry directed a heated glare to Hugh. "Sir, you forget yourself. 'Tis your king you address, and treasonous ground you tread upon." Hugh's face was redder than the crimson surcoat Draven wore over his armour. "Your Majesty, I beg you, do not ask this of me. My daughters are gentle creatures unused to hardship or the company of men. My eldest is to marry a few weeks hence, and her sister is a nun sworn to St. Anne's. Surely you cannot demand that they relinquish their oaths to be held hostage for an indefinite term." "You spoke of a third daughter?" Complete and utter horror was etched on Hugh's long, withered face. "Sire, Emily is the gentlest of all my daughters. She quivers at the slightest scare. An hour with Ravenswood, and she would die from her fear. I beg you, please do not demand this." Henry narrowed his eyes. "We wish the two of you had left us with a choice, but alas, we grow weary of the constant complaints and accusations of our lords. Indeed, on the morrow I am bound to Hexham to settle yet another matter between two barons who can't seem to mind their own lands." "All we want is peace!" Henry bellowed. The king's glare intensified. "Hugh, you are the one who beseeched the crown to intervene in this matter. We have given you our solution, so let it be done, and pity to the reckless soul who dares cross this crown." Henry appeared to calm a degree. "The Lady Emily is to be handed over to Draven for safekeeping." A lady in his home? Draven could feel his lips starting to curl at the thought. It was on his tongue to tell Henry to forget the whole matter, but one look and he knew better than to question the king's dictates. Then the most incredible thing happened. Hugh went down on his knees before Henry's throne. His yellow and white surcoat billowed around him in a puddle as he bowed down and touched his forehead on the stone floor. "Please, Majesty," Hugh begged, his voice quivering, "you cannot take my daughter and then ask only for Ravenswood's oath. I beg you, Emily is... she is my life. You may have my lands, but please leave my daughter be." For an instant Draven almost felt sorry for the man, until he recalled the village that had been burned in the dead of night, the women who had been raped and butchered in their beds. Had it not been for Henry's summons, he would have besieged Hugh's castle over the deed, and seen the Earl's walls torn asunder. But the king owed a blood debt to Hugh's father, and as the king's champion, Draven had been bound not to harm Hugh without royal decree. Like it or not, Draven knew that only the presence of Hugh's daughter in his home would guarantee Hugh's benevolent behavior toward Draven's people. And as always, he would protect his people and do as his king bade him. Henry stroked his beard in thought as he listened to Hugh continue to implore his mercy. "On your feet, Hugh. Hugh stood, his eyes shining bright from unshed tears. "We hear your plea, and we can assure you Draven takes his oaths most seriously. We have seen him execute his duty to us with acts of unquestionable loyalty. However, since you have been known to recant your oath, we must ensure that this time peace is kept." The king referred to the fact that Hugh had once promised to support Henry's claim to the throne, only to turn around 2 months later and join King Stephen's forces. Hugh was not one to be trusted. Ever. "If your majesty so doubts my loyalty, then why do I still have my lands?" Hugh asked. Henry's nostrils flared. "You have your father to thank for that, and rather than ask our motives, you should be grateful for our continued mercy, and should act with appropriate gratitude. Draven shall hold her for 1 year. If in that time you have shown yourself honourable, she shall be returned to you." Hugh's face turned to granite. "You act as if I'm the one who instigated this matter," he muttered. "Why am I to be punished while he—" "Silence!" Henry roared. "Another insolent word from you, and I shall see you stripped of all you hold dearest." Hugh wisely held his tongue, but his eyes glowed with pure malice. Henry motioned for his scribe to write down his decree. "Should you attack Draven or any of his people or lands in the coming year, your daughter will be his to do with as he pleases." Hugh slid his gaze to Draven. "And if he should harm or shame her, sire?" Henry's face hardened. "As the right hand of the crown, Draven knows firsthand what we do to traitors. We have trusted our life to Draven, and we will accept his pledge on the bones of St. Peter that he will not harm her. To allay your fears, Hugh, I shall send one of my personal physicians to inspect your daughter now and again in 1 year, to ensure she is returned to you in the same condition in which she leaves your protection." Then to Draven, Henry said, "Lady Emily will be considered our ward. Any harm done her will be done to us. We trust you will guard her accordingly." "Aye, your majesty, I shall guard her with my life." "'Tis good, then. Now go and make preparations. Draven, seek out our priest and make your oath." Henry directed his gaze to Hugh, then spoke ominously. "Draven will ride home with you to secure your daughter. Should our royal messengers return from Ravenswood with news she is not there, we will not be pleased." Simultaneously they bowed and walked backward from the throne room. Once the heavy wooden doors were closed behind them, Hugh whirled on Draven. "One way or another, I shall see you dead over this," he hissed. "Is that a threat?" Draven asked, with a hint of amusement in his voice. The last thing under heaven Draven feared was death. Indeed, it would come as a welcome relief. Simon grabbed Draven and pulled him back from Hugh. "The king lies within hearing," he whispered furiously. "Does either of you wish for another conference with him?" Hugh's eyes flared, and then he spun on his heel and stalked off. "Fear not, Hugh. I shall make your daughter most welcome." A curse echoed in the hallway, but Hugh never looked around, and it was only after the Earl was out of his sight that Draven allowed his face to show just how ill he felt inside. No lady had been inside Ravenswood in almost a score of years. Closing his eyes to blot the memory, Draven wished he could also block out the screams of terror and pleas for mercy that echoed through his head. And now another lady was coming. "It's only for 1 year," Simon whispered. Draven locked gazes with him. "Need I remind you, brother, of the curse?" "You are not your father." He arched a brow. "You think not? Am I not his equal in speed and battle? Does not everyone remark that I am truly his image?"
"You are not your father,"
Simon repeated. But Draven didn't hear it that time either, for he knew the truth. He was his father's son, and unlike Simon, the curse of that man's fetid blood beat through his veins. To bring a well-born woman to Ravenswood was to sign the order for her execution, and Draven was about to swear his holy honor on a lady's welfare. Fate was indeed a cruel bitch, and she was laughing mightily at him this day. Chapter 1.
All a woman ever needs to know about men is that they are creatures of their codpieces. Appeal to their choices, and you will have complete control of them, for when their male piece is in control, their brain is not.
Emily sat on her bed beside her sister Joanne, trying not to offend Alice by cracking a smile at her proclamation. She pressed her fist to her lips to hold back her mirth. Then Emily made the unfortunate mistake of looking at Joanne, and the two of them burst out laughing. Who wouldn't laugh, especially given the image in her mind of the over-exaggerated codpiece Joanne's betrothed wore? Why, Niles paraded around like the god Priapus at a virgin festival. Her maid, Alice, however, didn't look so pleased by their merriment. Clearing her throat, Emily pressed her lips together and did her best to sober. Alice set her hands on her hips and grimaced at them. At barely 5 feet in height, the maid was hardly one to intimidate. Still, they had been the ones to ask after the matter. The least they could do was listen without laughing.
"I thought my ladies were serious about this," Alice asked.
"Forgive us," Emily said, clearing her throat and folding her hands primly in her lap.
"We shall behave."
Indeed, they had no choice, for they were conspiring to gain Emily a husband, and since neither sister had any idea how to seduce a man to marriage, Alice had been the only woman at the castle they dare ask. Any other would have made straight for their father with the news. But luckily, the earthy and often corruptible Alice could be counted on to remain loyal to the ladies she served. Alice flipped her black braid over her shoulder and shrugged.
"Well, as Lady Joanne can attest, the seduction part be easy enough. 'Tis the keeping part that is difficult."
Joanne's face flushed deep red, highlighting her blue eyes.
"I did naught but enter the room. Niles was the one who seduced me."
Alice raised her hand, palm upward in triumph.
"As I said, the seduction, but what if he doesn't want to be seduced?"
Emily asked, interrupting her. Alice returned her hand to her hip. Though Alice was in fact 2 years younger than Emily, she had been around all sorts of men, and was considered by all the young women in the Shire an expert.
"M'lady,"
Alice said, her face one of studied patience,
"I had my flower plucked when I was scarce more than a girl, and I can assure you there's not a man born who isn't randy. The only reason you've never had to fight them off is because of his lordship's sharp sword."
Emily couldn't argue that. Her father kept watch over his daughters as if they were his most prized falcons, and he dared any man to look. And if one dared to touch, well, she was quite surprised Niles had anything left beneath his codpiece. Another thought struck her.
"But what if I want him, and he wants another?"
Emily asked. Alice sighed.
"Lady Emily, you are always so full of what-ifs and ands and buts. Let us say for argument that he might have interest elsewhere. All you must do is keep yourself in his presence. Flash him a little smile, a little ankle, an ankle?" Emily gasped. "I should be mortified." "Better mortified than an old maid."
Perhaps there was some truth to that, and at this point in her life she was becoming quite desperate. Her father wouldn't listen to reason, and if she had any hope of finding herself a husband, then she'd best be on with it.
"A little ankle,"
Emily repeated, her face growing hot at the mere thought.
"Anything else?" "Always make him wait," Alice said. "Anticipation makes a man appreciate you all the more."
Emily nodded. Joanne folded her arms over her chest.
"Now, the next question is, where do we find this man?"
Emily frowned in frustration.
"Aye, that would seem to be the crux of the whole seduction thing, wouldn't it? How can I make a man marry me when there's no desirable man to be found?" "Well," Alice said, "my mother always says you'll find your rose where and when you least expect it."
Later that day, Emily left the kitchens and headed back to the donjon. She'd no more than taken 2 steps when she found her way blocked by Theodore, the cousin of her sister's betrothed, and the man they had disaffectionately dubbed the demon from the devil's most odoriferous pit. They must have inadvertently summoned him with their words that morning, for Alice had no sooner finished her lecture than Niles and Theodore had shown up on their doorstep. A great big bear of a man, Niles had rudely taken Joanne off on a picnic and left his cousin behind. From the moment her sister and Niles had vanished, Theodore had done nothing save make a nuisance of himself, as he hung about her skirts while trying his best to get beneath them. Emily's patience had long worn thin, and all she wanted was peace from her pestilence. If Theodore be the rose Alice had referred to earlier, then Emily decided spinsterhood had great possibilities. He rushed to her side and immediately reached for her hand, sending a wave of revulsion up her spine. Why could he not leave her in peace? The man might be considered passably handsome, if a woman were desperate enough, and Emily prayed she never became that desperate. But he lacked basic hygiene. If it was true cleanliness was next to godliness, then this man had to be a heathen through and through, for his balding blonde hair looked as if it seldom saw a comb and had never known soap. His clothes were eternally rumpled as if he slept in them, and by the stains marring the fabric, she would say he cleaned them about as often as he did his hair. "Are you ready to give me my kiss now?" he asked.
Nay," she said, trying to step around him. "I fear I have many chores to do."
"Chores? Surely my company is far more desirable than any chore. Personally, she'd rather clean the cesspit." He stepped in front of her, cutting off her escape. "Come now, sweet Emily. I know how lonely you are here. Surely you dream of a man to come and claim you for his own." Aye, she did. But the key word was man. Since she barely classified Theodore as a bedbug, he would never be the one she dreamed of at night. He reached out and touched her veil to the side of her face in a familiar gesture that made her cock her brow in censure. He disregarded her look. "You're fast passing your prime, milady. Perhaps you should consider doing as your sister did in order to gain yourself a husband." Emily didn't know what part of that offended her more, the insult to her age, or the reminder of her sister's shame at being caught abed with Theodore's cousin.
"I can find my own husband, thank you," she said icily, "and without any help from you."
Anger darkened his gaze. "I will have you." He wound his fist in her veil. Emily clenched her teeth in expectation of pain as she jerked out of his hold. The pins that secured the veil to her head tugged at her hair before popping free and allowing her to escape. She rushed across the bailey, hoping to reach the crowded donjon before he caught her again. She was not so lucky. Theodore tossed her veil to the ground, and this time grabbed her arm to pull her to a stop. Emily winced at the way his fingers dug into her upper arm as she tried to pull away. Scared and angry, she wished her father home. No man ever dared such insolence while looking at his fierce countenance, and wherever Emily went, her father's watchful gaze always followed. "I will have a kiss, wench."
She would sooner kiss a leprous mule. Panicking, Emily looked about for some way to escape him. A flock of chickens rushed out just then, gathering about their feet. As Theodore kicked at them, she was suddenly hit by inspiration. She turned to face her pestilence with a charming smile as she recalled Alice's earlier advice. "Theodore," she said in her softest voice. It worked. The anger left his face, and he released her arm to take her hand. He placed a slimy kiss on her palm. "Ah, Emily, you've no idea how many nights I've lain abed dreaming of you and your soft sighs. Tell me, how much longer must I wait before I sample the fruit of your succulent thighs?" "Until the devil's throne turned into icicles." Emily barely caught the words before they escaped. She couldn't believe her luck. She finally found a man to whisper poetry to her, and it was the most offensively obscene poetry she could imagine, and came from a man who was only one step up from a warted troll. On second thought, he wasn't even a full step. She forced herself not to let her distaste show on her face as she wrested her hand from his cloying grip. She heard horses approach. Assuming they were her men-at-arms returning from patrol, she didn't even bother to look behind her as they entered the bailey. Instead, she coyly wiped her hand off on her skirt. "At last you have won me over, my lord." The arrogance on his face was unbelievable as he postured before her like some molting peacock. "I knew you wouldn't be able to resist me, milady. No woman ever has." He must make it his habit to stay in the company of women who'd lost their ability to see, their ability to judge, and, most of all, their ability to smell. "Close your eyes, Theodore, and I shall give you what your tenacity deserves." A sly smile curved his lips as he closed his eyes and leaned forward with what she assumed he thought was a seductive pucker. Wrinkling her nose at the awful face he made, she seized one of the red hens at her feet and lifted it to his lips. Theodore gave a loud smooch as he kissed its neck. Then it must have dawned on him that his lips were against feathers and not flesh, for he opened his eyes and met the curious gaze of a hen. His eyes widening, he gave a mighty shriek of surprise. The frightened hen squawked back in reprisal. It raised its wings and flapped about in Emily's hands as it fought for freedom. Emily let go, only to have it launch itself at Theodore, who raised his arm to ward it off, as its sister hens joined the fray. The hen pecked at his head, leaving tufts of his thin, greasy hair sticking straight up, while the other hens gathered about his feet, tripping him. Chickens and man tumbled backward in a cacophony of curses and clucks. With a curse to shame all others, Theodore stumbled into a water trough where he landed on his backside. Water splashed up all around him, and Emily had to step back to keep from being doused. The chicken screeched, then shot to the edge of the trough, where it buried its head in its feathers in an effort to smooth the damage Theodore had done. As Theodore came sputtering up from the water, the chicken moved to rest upon his head. Emily burst into laughter. "The gentlest maid on earth. Hugh, your lies know no bounds." That deep, resonant baritone was not the voice of one of her men-at-arms. Her laughter dying in her throat, Emily turned about to see her father in a company of 15 men. By his face, she could tell the depth of her father's displeasure. Still, relief overwhelmed her at his presence. At last she would have to tolerate Theodore no more. As she took a step in his direction, her gaze went to the left of her father. On the back of the whitest stallion she had ever seen sat a knight wearing a blood-red surcoat emblazoned with a black raven. Even though she couldn't see the man's face, she could feel his gaze upon her like a blistering torch. She stopped dead in her tracks. Never had she seen his like. He sat tall in the saddle as if he and the horse were one creature, united in power and in form. His mail armor draped most sinuously over a body rock-hard from years of training,
and he wore his armor with the ease of a second
Sample complete. Ready to continue?